Imagine being told you're not welcome at your own child's wedding, only to have a $120,000 bill show up in your inbox. A week later, itemized, bold, unapologetic, and expected to be paid in full. That's the kind of emotional whiplash that leaves you staring at your phone, wondering if someone is playing a cruel joke on you. But this wasn't a prank, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. This was my son, my own flesh and blood, sending me an invoice for the wedding he refused to let me attend, plus a luxury honeymoon package that cost more than some people make in a year. Before we even get into the bill, you need to understand how we got to this point, because this didn't come out of nowhere. We weren't always like this. There was a time when I thought my son and I were close, when I believed we understood each other, when I thought the bond between us was stronger than any petty disagreement or outside influence. But somewhere along the way, things changed, subtly at first, then all at once. And what started as small tension in wedding planning spiraled into a decision that broke my heart in ways I still struggle to explain. This is the story of how a parent ends up banned from a wedding, yet handed the bill for the entire event, and how everything leading up to that moment made it both shocking and, sadly, predictable. Growing up, my son was the kind of kid most parents dream of. Bright, curious, opinionated in a way that made you proud, not frustrated. He wasn't perfect, of course, but no child is. And the imperfections were the sort you laugh about later. Refusing to eat vegetables unless they were shaped like dinosaurs. Insisting he could negotiate bedtime like a lawyer. Correcting adults when they mispronounced Pokemon names. He had this big personality that filled every room he walked into. For most of his childhood, I genuinely believed we had something special. Something strong. I was a single parent for part of his life, and that created a closeness between us born from necessity, but held together by mutual trust. We didn't have everything, but we had each other, and that always felt enough. But as he got older, tiny cracks began forming, cracks I ignored because that's what parents do. When a teenager suddenly becomes moody or distant, you chalk it up to hormones, stress, growing pains. There were moments when he would say things that felt unusually harsh for a kid his age. Moments when entitlement peeked through like a shadow. He'd make comments about how other kids had nicer things, how other parents provided better, as if I wasn't doing everything I could. But I brushed those comments aside. Kids say things without understanding the weight of their words, right? Looking back, though, those were the first tremors before the earthquake. The real turning point came in college. He got into a good school, and I was proud, really proud, but something shifted in him during those years. It was as if the more independent he became, the more he viewed me as a resource instead of a parent. Phone calls weren't, "How are you?" or "I miss you." They became, "Can you send money?" or "I need help with tuition," or "Everyone else's parents paid for this. I helped when I could. Stretched myself thin, even went into debt at one point. I told myself it was temporary. I wanted him to succeed. I wanted him to have opportunities I never had. Then came the fiancé. I wish I could say I disliked her from the moment I met her, but that's not the truth. In fact, at first I liked her quite a bit. She was polite, put together, charming in that curated, social media-ready way. But as months passed, something in their dynamic didn't sit right. My son, who once had his own personality, began mirroring hers. The way he talked, the things he valued, the sudden obsession with status, everything changed. It was as if he became a different person overnight, one who measured love not in moments or sacrifices, but in money, one who believed he deserved the best simply because others had it. Things escalated when wedding discussions began. The fiancé's family had expectations, big ones. Lavish venue, designer dress, imported flowers, a rehearsal dinner at a 5-star location. And somehow, despite their family being more financially comfortable than mine, all of these expectations trickled down to me. It wasn't subtle either. Comments like, "Well, usually the groom's side pays for 9 calm," or "It's traditional for parents to contribute this amount," began popping up with increasing frequency. My son echoed them too. The same son who once bragged that his parent raised him alone, that he respected hard work, now spoke to me like a credit card that walked and talked. What hurt wasn't the money. Money is replaceable. What hurt was how transactional our relationship became. Every phone call involved finances. Every text included a request. And every time I tried to steer the conversation toward feelings or concerns, he dismissed me. He was busy. Wedding planning was stressful. I was being dramatic. His fiancée would jump in sometimes, making polite but pointed remarks that made it clear I was expected to contribute, but not to be emotionally involved. So by the time the major wedding conflicts rolled in, the foundation was already eroding. I could feel it. You know that feeling when something is slipping out of your hands, but you're scared to squeeze too tight because you don't want to break it? That was me. I held on, hoping things would level out after the wedding, hoping the son I raised was still in there somewhere. But the truth is, the wedding didn't create the rift. It exposed it. All the entitlement, the pressure, the disregard, the subtle disrespect. It had been simmering for years. I just didn't want to believe it. Because admitting it meant admitting that somewhere along the journey from childhood to adulthood, something in our relationship broke. And I wasn't ready to face that. Not yet. From the moment wedding planning began, it became clear this wasn't going to be a simple, joyful celebration. It was going to be a production. Not a wedding, but a spectacle. The kind meant for photo albums, not memories. The kind where the decorations mattered more than the people standing in the room. Every conversation with them revolved around extravagance. $10,000 floral arches, a venue that cost more than my yearly salary, a live band flown in from across the country, and designer suits to match the theme. At first, I assumed they were brainstorming, dreaming out loud like many couples do. Couples often start big and scale down. But they weren't brainstorming, they were planning. And their plan had a very expensive expectation attached to it. The first red flag came when my son casually mentioned the venue deposit. He said it the way someone might say, "Oh, I picked up some groceries." Except the groceries were a $25,000 minimum. I nearly choked. I asked him if that was really necessary, if maybe they could choose something more reasonable. He brushed me off immediately. "This is what she's always dreamed of. Mom, don't ruin this." That stung. I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I was trying to bring reason into a conversation drowning in financial delusion. As time went on, the requests became demands. The fiancé's parents offered to cover some expenses, but only the ones that benefited their side. They paid for her dress, her bridal shower, a portion of the catering. But everything else? My son looked directly at me. There was no discussion, no consideration of my situation, no moment where he asked if I was even able to afford what he asked. He simply assumed as if it was my duty. Whenever I tried to set boundaries, the atmosphere shifted. He became irritated, defensive, accusatory. "Why are you being difficult? Why can't you just support me? Everyone else's parents are helping. Why not you?" It didn't matter how much I explained my financial limitations. It didn't matter how much I reminded him of the sacrifices I had already made over the years. In his mind, I was simply failing to meet his expectations. The conflict reached its peak when they sent me a document, an actual spreadsheet outlining the expected contributions from each parent. It was neat, organized, color-coded, and absolutely insane. My portion came to nearly $50,000. I stared at the screen, wondering if this was a joke. But there it was. Line items, costs, percentages, all with my name beside them. I called him immediately, thinking surely this was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. He answered with a sigh, the kind teenagers use when you ask them to clean their room. "Mom, we talked about this. You know these are the costs." Except we hadn't talked about anything. They told me their plans. They never once asked for my input. When I told him I couldn't afford it, he didn't react with compassion or concern. Instead, he snapped, "So you're saying you're not going to support my marriage?" That line lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. He wasn't asking for help. He was selling guilt. We argued, but it wasn't a real argument because nothing I said mattered. He had decided that supporting his wedding meant paying for it. When I refused, even gently, he accused me of embarrassing him. He said the fiancé's family thought I wasn't pulling my weight. He even hinted that they questioned my love for him. And he repeated those words, "You're ruining this," again and again. The worst part wasn't the money. It was realizing my opinion held no weight. I wasn't a parent. I was a financial obligation, a line item on a spreadsheet, a wallet with emotions they had no interest in respecting. That was when the shift happened. Not a sudden explosion, but a cold distance. My calls were ignored. My messages left on read. Plans were made without me. I was no longer being spoken to. I was being managed. And somewhere in the midst of those weeks, I understood that the wedding wasn't about family. It wasn't about unity. It was about image. And I didn't fit into the picture they wanted to create. The moment everything snapped wasn't theatrical. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors, no dramatic walkouts. It was quieter than that, more controlled, more deliberate, and somehow more painful. It began with an invitation, or rather the absence of one. One afternoon, the fiancé texted me a link to their wedding website. I clicked through the pages, scrolling past glossy photos and curated biographies until I reached the guest list page. My name wasn't there. At first, I assumed it was an oversight, an error in the website software, something easily fixed. I texted my son, no answer. I tried again. No answer. Hours passed. When he finally called, his tone was clipped, efficient, like he was on his way to a meeting and had only 30 seconds to spare. "Mom, we need to talk about the wedding," he said flatly. My stomach tightened. He took a breath. "We decided it's best if you don't come." Those words hit harder than any argument we'd ever had. For a second, I genuinely couldn't speak. I just sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, trying to process the enormity of what he'd said. "You're uninviting me?" I finally asked, my voice shaking. "It's not like that," he replied, which is exactly what people say when it's exactly like that. He went on to explain that things had become too stressful, that my refusal to contribute financially had created tension, and that the fiancé felt uncomfortable. Having someone there who didn't support the vision for the wedding. Support the vision? I wasn't refusing to attend their celebration. I was refusing to fund their fantasy. I told him how deeply this hurt me, how absurd it was to ban a parent from their child's wedding over money. He didn't budge. His tone became harsher, colder, as if he had prepared for this conversation and built walls around himself in advance. He said, "It's our decision. Please respect it." Respect it? Respect being excluded from the most important day of his adult life? Respect being cast aside like I no longer mattered? I asked him if he understood what he was doing, if he genuinely believed a wedding was worth severing our relationship. His answer was a sharp, dismissive sigh. "You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. He had already made peace with the decision. He didn't call to discuss. He called to inform. The emotional fallout was immediate and overwhelming. I spent nights replaying our conversation, wondering how we'd gone from a close family unit to this cold, transactional relationship. I blamed myself. I blamed him. I blamed the fiancé. I blamed the world. Anything to make sense of it. I wondered if I had failed him somehow. If the years of struggle as a single parent had created resentment in him that I never knew existed. Or if he had grown into someone I didn't recognize. Someone shallow. Entitled, absorbed in image over substance. Other family members found out quickly. Some called to express shock and sympathy. Others tiptoed, trying not to pick sides. A few suggested giving him time, assuming he would eventually come around. But the truth is, the decision wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. He and his fiancée had discussed it, agreed on it, and acted on it. It wasn't made in anger. It was made with intention. And that made it hurt even more. In the days that followed, I kept expecting a text, an apology, some sign of remorse, something, anything. Instead, silence. Cold, echoing silence. He posted engagement photos online, tagged every vendor, every venue partner, every influencer-adjacent acquaintance, but not a single word to me. What broke me wasn't the act itself. It was the realization that he didn't consider the emotional consequence. He didn't think banning his parent would matter. Or worse, he thought it did matter but believed the wedding mattered more. I wasn't just uninvited. I was erased. Just when I thought the situation couldn't possibly get worse, the universe delivered a plot twist so absurd it felt like satire. A week after being banned from the wedding, I received an email from my son. No subject line, no greeting. Just a PDF attachment titled Wedding and Honeymoon Final Invoice. For a moment, I honestly thought it was spam. A phishing attempt. A scammer pretending to be my son. But no, it was very real. I opened the document and there it was. An itemized bill totaling $120,000. My name was listed at the top as the responsible party. Responsible party. Not parent, not contributor, not even guest, which would have been ironic enough considering I wasn't allowed to attend. No responsible party. As if this was a corporate expense report. The invoice was broken down into sections. Ceremony, reception, catering, photography, videography, luxury, accommodations for the honeymoon, flights, excursions, spa packages, even the fiancé's designer swimsuit collection, was listed under honeymoon clothing. Allowance. I had to reread several items. Because they were so outlandish, they bordered on comedic. My first reaction was disbelief, then laughter, then nausea. Finally, anger erupting so intense I felt it in my fingertips. I called him immediately. This time he answered on the first ring, almost as if he expected the call. His tone was businesslike. "I assume you saw the invoice?" "The invoice?" I repeated, stunned. "You mean the $120,000 bill for a wedding? I'm not invited to?" He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't even sound embarrassed. "Mom, you knew these were the costs. It's only fair that you pay your portion." "My portion?" I nearly shouted. "I'm not even going." "That's your choice," he snapped. "But not contributing isn't an option. We already signed contracts. We're counting on you." "Counting on me?" "Counting on me the way someone counts on a loan, a credit card, a financial escape route." I reminded him, again, that I didn't agree to these expenses. I didn't approve them. I wasn't consulted. I was informed. And being informed after decisions are made does not equal consent. But he refused to listen. Instead, he lectured me about tradition, about support, about what parents are expected to do, as if cultural expectation excused financial insanity, as if love could be quantified and converted into a dollar amount. At one point he said, "This is the most important day of my life. Don't be selfish." That line nearly broke me. Selfish. After everything I had sacrificed for him. After years of giving without asking for anything in return. After raising him, feeding him, supporting him through school. Carrying emotional burdens he'll never fully understand. Somehow I was the selfish one. When I refused again, firmly this time, his mask cracked. He became cruel, cold, accusatory. He said things designed to wound. And they succeeded. He accused me of wanting to ruin the wedding, embarrassing him in front of her, family, even sabotaging his future. It was like talking to a stranger. Worse, a stranger who had rehearsed every manipulative argument in advance. Eventually he hung up on me. Not a goodbye, not a frustrated sigh. He simply said, "I'll expect the payment by the end of the month." And the line went dead. I sat there staring at the invoice, realizing the full weight of what had happened. He didn't just exclude me. He didn't just disrespect me. He used me. And when I didn't comply, he punished me for it. I didn't pay, not a single dollar. The aftermath of that decision is still unfolding. He's angry. The fiancé's family is angry. But for the first time in a long time, I chose myself, my boundaries, my financial stability, my dignity. And if that means losing my son for now, or even forever, then maybe the truth is, I lost him long before the bill ever arrived. In the end, this entire experience forced me to confront a truth I never wanted to face. Sometimes the people we love the most grow into versions of themselves we barely recognize. I spent months wondering what I could have done differently, how I could have prevented this, how a wedding, a day meant to unite families, became the wedge that tore ours apart. But the reality is, love doesn't mean surrendering your dignity. And supporting someone doesn't mean financing their fantasies. I made the choice to stand my ground, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And while it hurts to know my son may not understand that right now, I have to believe that someday he'll look back and realize what this cost, not financially, but emotionally. Maybe one day he'll see past the glitter, the pressure, the expectations, and remember the parent who raised him, not the wallet he thought he had. Until then, I'm taking this as a lesson. Boundaries are not punishments, and saying no is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself. If you've ever faced something similar, know this: you're not alone. And your worth is not measured by what you can pay for,